Hello coders, and thanks for joining us for part 3 of the Unity Dynamic UI series. The next few tutorials in this series will be pretty script heavy in C#, so I'm going to warn you, if you don't know C#, then I would encourage you to go check out our C# tutorial videos on our channel. They're going to help you out a lot. Everything you need to know is going to be in those tutorials. Alright, but let's go ahead and get started, guys. This is what we're going to be doing in this tutorial. We're going to be creating these little tooltips or notifications, if you will, and they're going to be able to do different things. Alright, and so as you can see, we're going to have three main ways of opening these tooltips. One way is going to be from the width first, and then we expand the height. And then here we have an expansion of the height first, and then we open to the right with the width. And then here we have an expansion of the width and the height at the same time. Now you may have noticed that they are opening from different locations. This one opens up from about right here. This one opens up from the top left corner. And this one opens up from the bottom of the middle. Okay, so again, from the top middle here, top left here, and from the bottom middle here. Okay, and so these are just three ways that we can open these guys up. And after learning the code that we're going to learn today, there's going to be many other options that you guys can explore, and we will talk about how you can explore those options later in the video. Okay, but let's go ahead and get into the code to how we get this to work. All right. Okay, so like I said, it's going to be pretty script heavy here. This script alone contains around 200 lines, but don't worry, I'm going to go over each aspect of it in detail with you guys. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in. Now the first thing we need to do is, since we're dealing with UI elements, we need to add the using statement for Unity Engine UI. And essentially this is going to allow us to use the UI data types such as images and buttons, since we're going to be manipulating those at runtime. Okay, and so we have references to those in our script. Then we come back down and we have a system.serializable. Now this is going to allow us to serialize our classes so that they can be seen within the inspector. And now what I do with this script, and what you guys are going to see me do a lot of times, is I'm going to add classes to my script because it organizes my code whenever I need it the most. So as it relates to the notifications or the tooltips, I have two categories of settings. I have animation settings, which is going to relate to how I want my box or my tooltip to animate or open. So I have that information here. You know, how fast I want it to open, and basically that's it. And then I have my general UI settings, which are going to hold my image that I'm manipulating, hold my text that I'm manipulating, and deal with the settings that relate to how large I want them to be, the lifespan of the tooltip before it fades out, and things like that. So what I do with my code is I'll generally, before I write any code, I'll sort of plan it out on a piece of paper. I'll plan out everything that I'm going to need, and then I'll try to categorize it, and what I'll do is I'll bump those categories into their own classes. And so this is what I came up with. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because I've had several requests for learning how to structure code, and this is just one of the ways that I do it. Okay, this is my personal preference. You don't have to do it like this at all. But anyway, I'm digressing. Let's go ahead and move further. So system.serializable, again, it's going to allow our inspector to see our class's variables. And whenever you actually create a public class and to see it in the inspector, it actually looks a lot better than if we didn't have a class. So what happens is our classes get categorized by the inspector with these drop down arrows, and so it just looks a lot cleaner. Without the classes, you would just have all of these input fields here without any way to collapse them. Okay, so I kind of like that aspect as well. Alright, so I start off with my animation settings by defining an enumeration for open style, and as you could see in the introduction to this video, we have three main ways to open: width to height. So our width is going to be expanded first, and then our height will be expanded after the width is. And then we have height to width, which is the opposite. And then we have height and width. And so what this is going to do is it's going to expand the width of our text box and the height at the same time. All right, and then I create a variable of type open style for my enumeration. And then what I do is I define the smoothing variables, and anytime you see smoothing, it's typically going to relate to how fast or slow you want something to happen. So my width smooth is going to determine how fast I want my width to expand, and then my height smooth is going to determine how fast I want my height to expand. My text smooth is going to determine how fast I want my text to fade in whenever it's ready to. Okay. Then we have this hide in inspector. And whenever I say hide in inspector, it's going to prevent my public variable on the next line below from being viewed in the inspector. Okay, so typically you're just going to use this whenever you know you don't need the variables to be in the inspector. All right, and I don't need these to be in there. Now I use width open and width height as booleans because we need to know when each one is finished opening. Since we have this sort of order of operations to our open styles, so with width to height, I want my width to be fully open before my height starts opening. And so I need booleans to keep track of that. And then I have an initialize for my animation settings. And what this is going to do is allow me to reinitialize my settings whenever I'm ready to run the animation again. So whenever my text box fades out and the animation is done, I want to be able to run that animation again from the settings, from the default settings. Okay, so what I need to do for the animation settings is set my width open and my height open to false. Okay, if these are left to be true, I won't be able to open my text box again. All right. Then I create my other class for UI settings, and again I use system.serializable. Now in my UI settings I have references to my image and my text that I'll be manipulating at runtime. And my text box is going to be the box that will contain my text content, and my text is going to be the tooltip message. All right, and then I have a couple vector 2s for the size of my text box. The initial box size is going to be where the size starts at, so this is going to be pretty small. As you could see, whenever let's go ahead and look at this again. As you can see, whenever I open up my text, you can see the small little line, which is the effect that I wanted to go with. And so what that is that's the initial width. If you look here, this is the initial width being maintained until it's ready to be expanded out. All right, so let's look at it again. So that width right there is actually directly related to this initial box size. Okay, and so we have an X which correlates to the width, and a Y which correlates to the height. Okay, and then I have my open box size vector 2, which is how big I want the box to be at the max size. Okay, then I have the snap to size distance, and what this is going to allow me to do is say, okay, how close is my current width or my current height from my target width or my target height, and whenever they're within this distance, I'm going to just snap the current to the target. Okay, and this is pretty necessary when you're dealing with lerping, which is what we're going to be dealing with, because lerp, as you approach the target, slows down a lot. So we want to have this value here to go ahead and snap. I'll cover that more in detail below. And then we have a lifespan variable, which is just going to be how long we want this tooltip to remain active on the screen before it fades out. All right, and then I have some more variables here that don't need to be seen by the inspector. They're simply needed for the methods and functions within this class. I have a bool opening. I initialize it to false whenever we click the button. Okay, so when we click the button to open it up, this gets set to true. And the reason for that is anytime I click the button after this is set to true, nothing is going to happen, okay, because it's already happening. So this is just a way of keeping track of whether I'm allowed to open the box yet or not. And so whenever whenever the animation is done, we set opening back to false so it can be ready to be opened again. All right. Now I have some references to colors. I'm going to be modifying the colors of the text in the text box, basically for fading reasons. And the reason that I create references to the colors is because it prevents me from needing to create new vector 4s or new vector 2s. Well, for color, it's vector 4. All right, and so let me show you what I mean by this. Let's say I want to modify my text.color. and all I want to do for the purpose of this script is modify the alpha component so it can fade out. Okay, and so what I can't just say text.color.a equals something, because I'm going to get this error that says cannot modify the return value of the UI graphic.color. All right, so in order for me to get something like this to work, I would have to say text.color equals new vector 4, and then put my values in there as they're needed. Okay, and so we don't want to be doing this every frame. We don't want to be creating new vectors every frame because it's wildly inefficient. All right, so what I do is I create references to those, because what it allows me to do is if I have just this color variable, I can actually say text.color.a equals something, and then I can set my text.color equal to text color. So that's going to be the same thing for text box color, and it's the same reason that I use current size for the current size of my text box. All right, and so that brings me down to my rect transform. My rect transform is going to be a reference to my text box rect transform, which allows me, it contains variables that allow me to modify the width and the height of the text box. Okay, so that's rect transform. And actually, if you look in the inspector, we can take a look at rect transform right here. This is going to go on our images. Okay, so rect transform right here, it contains width and the height. It contains position information, anchor information, pivot information, everything you need to modify your images. All right. Okay. And again, I use the reference to the current size for the same reason that I use references to color. It's so that I don't have to create new vector 2s for the text box rect dot size delta. Okay, and so let me talk about size delta real quick. Size delta is essentially the vector 2 that corresponds to the anchors. And so the way this size delta works is it calculates width and height based on the anchors. And one important note about size delta is it's only going to have expected results if, okay, let me go ahead and click on my text box. So it's only going to have expected results if your anchors, see my anchors here, if your anchors are all together in one spot. If I move my anchors out like this, okay, my size delta, my width components are going to have unexpected results. I'll go ahead and run that to show what I mean. So if I click this, you can see how a little bit strange it is. It's not the expected behavior that we wanted, and that's because our anchors aren't grouped together. So size delta works based off the anchors. As long as our anchors are all together, then your size delta is going to essentially be your width and your height of your text box. Okay, so size delta is if you think size delta.x is your width and size delta.y is your height. Okay, and so that's going to be initialized to our initial box size. The rest of this initialization code is pretty standard, and again, this initialize is going to be called each time that we're ready to run the animation again. So whenever the animation ends, we want to initialize our default settings so that we can go ahead and click the box or click the button again to expand the box how we want it to be expanded. Okay, so all these values are going to be our default settings. I set opening to false as I said I would. I set my current size equal to textbox rect.size delta. So I want my current size to be whatever it's at currently, which is initial box size. All right. And then I set my colors to where I want them to be. I want my text color alpha to be set to 0, and I want my text box color alpha to be set to 1. So initially my text box will be fully opaque and my text will not. That's why we have the text fading in only whenever the text box is fully opened. And then what I do is I set my text box and my text to false. So I set them active to false. And the reason I do this is because I want to make sure that the user isn't going to see the text or the text box unless I want them to. And so as you can see down here, this public void start open is the method that's called whenever we click the button. And whenever we click the button, I set opening to true, and then I set my text box and my text active to true. All right. And that way I'm controlling whether or not I want these UI elements to be seen. Okay. One thing that we can't forget is whenever we create classes that we want the inspector to be able to see, we need to actually initialize our instances of the class like this. So we're actually creating an instance of animation settings and setting it equal to new animation settings. Same thing with the UI settings variable. And then we're going to be using this, the anim settings and the UI settings to access the public members of those classes from the rest of our script. So you can see here, I'm initializing using the dot operator. So we're going to be using the dot operator a lot in the rest of this script. All right. Okay, let's move on. So this is the method that will be called when the button is clicked. I'll show you guys how to set that up. It's pretty simple. Let's come down to update. Okay, so in update we have, we're checking whether or not this opening boolean is true. Okay, so nothing is going to happen unless this boolean is set to true. And so what we do first is, if it is set to true, we want to open the tooltip. So let's go ahead and explore this method first. All right, so our tooltip method is going to be running a switch statement on our open style enumeration. Okay, so our open style enumeration is going to have these 3 different styles, and based on which style we have selected, we're going to run a different method for each. Okay, and so each one of these is pretty much the same. They're going to be using the methods. Okay, so width to height. Okay, so what I'm doing for open width to height is I'm checking if the width is open. If it's not open, then I want to keep opening the width. And then I say else, so if the width is open, then I want to open the height. And so this is opening from width to height. So the height won't be getting opened until the width open boolean is set to true. All right, so let's go to our open width method. Our open width method is going to be using the lerp that I was talking about, and I use the current size vector 2 that we initialized in the UI settings class. All right, and since I'm modifying the width, I'm going to be accessing the .x member of the vector. All right, and so I do a mathf.lerp on this value from the current size.x to the open box size.x. So this is, remember, this is the size that we want to open to. And then I say the anim settings.width smooth. Remember, this is how fast we want the width to open. And then since we're in the update event function, we're going to be using time.delta time. So we want to multiply any runtime speeds by time.delta time if we're in the update event function, which we are. All right. Okay, and then what I say is, this is where we're going to be using the snap to distance, snap to size distance. Okay, so what I say is I say mathf.abs, which is absolute value. Okay, so even if it's negative, it'll return a positive value. And what I do is I subtract the open box size.x from the current size.x, and essentially all I'm checking here is how close the current size is to the open box size. And if that value, if that difference is less than the snap distance, then we're going to set the current size to the target size, and then we're going to make sure that we say the width open is equal to true. Okay, and now the open height method is the exact same, only we're modifying the y values. All right, it's exactly the same, only we're modifying the y values of current size and open box size. And then instead of saying the width open is true, we're going to say the height open is true. Okay, so that's those methods. Now if we come back to open width to height, we went over this. So if the width isn't open, then we want to open width. Whenever that width open boolean gets set to true, then we can open the height. All right, then the open height to width is essentially the opposite. We're checking if the height open is false. If it is, then we're going to open the height. Whenever the height open is true, then we're going to open the width. And then with open height and width, we're basically doing both things at the exact same time. So we're checking if width open is false, and if it is, we're going to open the width. And we're doing that at the same time. We're checking if the height open is false, and if the height open is false, then we're going to open the height. Okay, so both of these things are going to be happening simultaneously in this method. And so coming back to our open tooltip method, our switch statement is going to be running each one of these methods based on our enumeration that we set in our animation settings. Okay, and of course our default, if it can't find the animation settings that we wanted, or if it can't find the animation settings that we set, then it's going to log this error. All right, so this shouldn't be an issue for us right now. And then the last thing we need to make sure we do is set the size delta. Okay, so in the open width and open height methods, what we're doing is we're modifying current size. Okay, and this is essentially so our operations can happen quicker. All right, so we're only modifying current size. We're not actually moving or resizing the box rect at that point. Instead, what we do is we call this once at the very end of any operations that got done, and we say that the text box rect dot size delta is equal to the current size. And so we only have to call that once per frame, which is the preferred way to do it because it's a little bit faster. All right. So again, the size delta is going to be a vector2 that contains width and height information if our anchors are all grouped together on this text box rect. Okay. And so again, we can't forget to do that. Otherwise, we won't see our text box rect get changed. And I can show you that right now, actually. So if I comment that out, and I come up to play, I can click, and you can see something started to happen here with the little dot. And I can click this one so you guys can see it again. You see something appear here, but the actual width of that box isn't opening. Okay. And so we have the same little blue dot down there. All right, so that's the reason, again, that we use this line of code. So we're actually modifying the text box width and height. All right, so that covers this part of the update method. And then what we do is we say, okay, if the width is open and the height is open, then we're going to check for the life. Okay, and so what we do is we increment this life timer plus equal to delta time, and then we compare it. We say if the life timer is greater than our lifespan, then we can go ahead and fade our tooltip out. Else, okay, so if we're not fading the tooltip out, we're fading the text in. Okay, and so this is only if our width is open and only if our height is open are we going to be fading the text in. Okay, and essentially until our life runs out, we are going to be fading the text in. Whenever our life runs out, we're going to be fading the tooltip out. Okay, so let's look at these two methods. Let's first look at fade text in. Okay, so in our fade text in method, it's just 2 lines, and what we're doing is we're saying the text color.a is getting lerped. So we're saying it equals mathf.lerp. We're lerping from text color.a to 1. So 1 is fully opaque, which is the value we're trying to attain. And then we're doing it at this speed. So we're doing it at the text smooth times time.delta times speed. And then finally, just like we had to set the size delta, we have to remember to set the text color equal to our reference color. Okay. All right. And then the other method and the last method that we're going to cover is the fade tooltip out. Okay, so this happens when our life runs out. And what we're going to do is we're going to modify the text color and the text box color. And again, we're lerping these values. We're lerping them both to 0, both of the alpha values to 0. And we're not forgetting to set the actual text.color to the text color, setting the actual text box.color to the text box color reference color that we set in the UI settings. Okay, and then finally what we do is we say if the text box color.a is less than 0.01f. Okay, so basically if it's faded this much, I don't want to keep lerping. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to set the text box and the text active to false, and I'm going to set opening to false. So this is doing what I said earlier. This is basically the point. Okay, so this is essentially the point where our animation is done and we need to reinitialize. Okay, so whenever we reinitialize, we're setting all of our settings back to default so that we can be ready to run the animation again. And the last thing that we make sure we don't want to forget is we need to set our life timer back to 0. Okay, so that we can work our way back up to our lifespan variable. All right. Okay, guys, so that is just about it with the script. I know that there's a lot to it. If you guys would prefer me to write the code as I talk about it, feel free to ask me to do that. But the reason that I do it this way is so that you guys don't have to waste your time with me trying to figure out how to get everything to work. Instead, you guys can just listen to me explain how everything works, and you know the code works because I run the code in the video. I run the program in the video. Okay, so this is the script. If it was confusing, let me know. If you guys have any tips for how I can better explain things, again, ask in the comment section below. Okay, but that's going to do it with the script. And what I want to do now is show you guys how to set up the actual UI elements for your scenes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all my tooltips here. All right, and we're going to start from scratch. Let's go ahead and, yeah, I guess I'll delete my canvas as well so we can do all this from scratch. Okay, so we're going to right click in the hierarchy. We're going to go to UI, create a canvas, and I want my canvas, I'm going to get in the habit of doing this with you guys. I want my canvas scale mode to be set to scale with screen size, and I want to set my match to 0.5 so that the width and the height both get scaled based on my screen size, and this is going to help with our multi-resolution UI elements. Okay, and then once I have my canvas, I want to set a background image. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to set my color to this dark gray. And then a trick that we can do is we can click on this anchor here. Okay, so this is the anchor box in the top left of the rect transform component. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt Shift, so Alt and Shift, and I'm going to click on this box in the bottom right. And what that's going to do is it's going to force my image to stay the size of the screen no matter what. All right, and I'm going to call this background image. All right. Now what I want to do is start working on creating my tooltip. All right, and my tooltip is going to be a button. So let's create a button here. All right, and I'm going to make this button a little bit bigger. I want to call the button tooltip, and then I'm going to change the color of my button to that. I forget what color I had. I kind of liked it though. I think it was like a teal maybe. Oh well, it doesn't really matter what color it is. But yeah, find a nice color that you guys like. Let's change our button text to click me. All right. And then I'm going to change my font. So it's nice to just have your own fonts inside your project so you don't have to stick with that default Arial. All right, and then I'm going to set it to best fit so it stays the size of my button. All right. And that'll be it for that. Now what I want to do is I want to create my text box image. Okay, so this is going to be child of the tooltip button. So I'm going to create an image. I'm going to drag it down here. So this is going to be wherever I want my button to be in reference, or wherever I want my text box to be in reference to my button. And I had all of mine at the bottom. Okay, and so I'm going to set my color for this one as well. All right, so this is my text box, okay, that we were referencing in my script. And my text box is going to have some text in it, which I'm going to make child. And I want my text box text to always be in the top left. So one way I'm going to accomplish that is just set my anchors to the top left. Okay, but I don't want my origin, my pivot point, to be up in the top left. So this is my pivot point that I'm moving around. And the pivot point is going to determine where your width and your height is expanded from. Okay, so I'll show you guys that in a second. And then I'm just going to add some text to my, I just want to add some text to my text box, something that isn't just new text. All right, I want to make this best fit. All right. All right, so there we have our text content, and I believe that is actually going to be it. So now all I need to do is drag my tooltip script onto my tooltip item, and most of these settings are going to be fine where they are. I think what I did was I actually made my width expand pretty quick, and then I made my height expand a little bit slower. And my initial text box size needs to be 1 and 1. And then what I do for my open box size is I'll go to my text box and I'll look at the width and the height that it's at currently. So we'll say 270 by 130. And then I use these values to set my open text box or my open box size values. Okay, so my width is 270, my my height is 130. All right. My snap to size distance was good at 0.25. My lifespan is good at 5. All right, and so I need to drag these references to the text box and the text on here. So text box is going to be this, and text is going to be this. All right, width to height. Okay, so these are going to be our different open styles. We'll start with width to height to make sure that works. Okay, so there's one more thing that we need to do. In our button, our button has a button component. And what we do is we see this on-click event modifier here. And so what we want to do is click the plus button. Okay, so we click the plus button at the bottom right of this. And then here you can see it's looking for an object. What we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop the tooltip object onto that field. And what you'll see is that we find our tooltip script whenever okay, so you see the no function button here. So what it's saying is that I don't have a function to look at to activate. So we click that and we come down, we see our tooltip script, okay? And inside our tooltip script, we have all these items here, and we can see our start open method, okay? So start open was a method, if you remember, that I created in my script right here, which is why it's able to see that. All right, and it has to be public for you to be able to see it. All right. Okay, so we have that again, tooltip and then start open. So that's going to be on click. All right. And that should be all we have to do. So let's go ahead and run. And then I can click and you can see, now notice where it opened from, okay? And I need to increase my text smooth there because it's fading in really slowly. All right. So notice how it opened from the middle here. And the reason is, okay, because silly me, I moved the origin of my text when I needed to move the origin of my text box. Okay, so my text box is here in the middle, the pivot. So I'm going to move it up here to the top middle. And if I run this, you can see it starts up here. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, the different options you can explore, how you want your tooltip or your notification item to display, whatever you want to call it. And so some other things that we can do is actually drag this over here. And I could say I want it to open, and I think I had it opening like this in the introduction to the series. So it's going to open starting from this location, okay, up here in the top left. So if I run this now, you can see it opening from there. All right. And so this is one of those things that you're just going to have to play with if you decide to use this in your menu systems. And this whole component isn't limited to 2D space for menus. You could actually use the same thing inside world space and 3D coordinates if you wanted to. Okay, so the same exact code should work in 3D space. And we'll explore that in later tutorials as well. Okay, so play around with that. Let me know what you guys come up with, if you find any cool ways to display that text box. If you like the video, please drop a like. Those likes really help us gauge how important these tutorials are to you guys, or what you guys like to see. So likes really matter to us, not because we like to feel ourselves or anything, but yeah, I mean, we like to know what you guys like, so we know that we're making the correct content for you guys. So again, you know, like our videos if you like them. If you don't, then don't worry about it. But as always, this has been a Renaissance Coders tutorial. We'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.